Hi guys, so today we're going to be covering Chapter 5 in the codebook Alice and Bob Go Public. So to begin with, in World War II, British codebreakers developed the Colossus to break the German Lorenz cipher that was being utilized by Hitler and his generals. The encryption of the Lorenz cipher was performed by the Lorenz SZ40 machine, similar to but more complicated than the Enigma machine. This was eventually broken by John Tilghman and Bill Tutte using a mixture of searching, matching, statistical analysis, and careful judgment. However, it still took a very long time to break and decipher the messages. This led to Max Newman, a mathematician, designing the first programmable computer to mechanize the decryption process. And in December of 1943, Tommy Flowers developed and built Newman's design, calling it the Colossus. The Colossus was destroyed after the war, along with projects, designs, and paperwork from Bletchley Park, a top-secret location that housed Britain's most professional codebreakers. This development of electrical computers revolutionized code-breaking and code-making. Computers could mimic hypothetical cipher machines. It sped up encryption and decryption. It also allowed for numbers to be scrambled instead of letters. But as computers became popularized, cryptographers began to struggle with the idea of key distribution. One of the people that struggled with the idea of key distribution was Whitford Diffie, a cryptographer from New York. After the discovery of ARPANET by the US Defense Department in the 1960s, Diffie could see the beginnings of the information superhighway and the digital revolution. He believed that ordinary people would have their own computers one day, and these people would be connected by phone lines. Because of this, he thought that if people used their computers to exchange emails, then they had a right to encrypt these messages and ensure privacy. Martin Hellman, a Stanford University professor born in the Bronx, New York, also shared this same goal, and in 1974, Diffie and Hellman formed a duo with one goal: to solve the key distribution problem. They were later joined by Ralph Merkle, and in 1975 made a breakthrough, discovering the asymmetric cipher. Here is a short video describing the Diffie-Hellman key exchange breakthrough. In short, they discovered that the solution to key exchange would be asymmetric cryptography. Previously, cryptography had been done using symmetric methods, but they didn't know exactly how to do this. This is where Ron Rivest, Adi Shamir, and Leonard Alderman come in. They were researchers at the MIT Laboratory for Computer Science. Rivest is a computer scientist said to have a great ability to think out of the box and absorb new ideas, while Shamir is said to have the ability to focus on the core of a problem, and he had also worked on formulated ideas for the asymmetric cipher previously, while Alderman is a mathematician with great stamina and patience, and his job was essentially to spot the flaws in Rivest and Shamir's ideas. All three of them read the Diffie and Hellman's paper about one-way functions and asymmetric ciphers, and initially Alderman did not want to pursue trying to figure out the issues of asymmetric ciphers, but eventually he was convinced by Rivest. The team had been working on a solution to the asymmetric cipher for a while, and after dinner in April 1977, Rivest had a breakthrough. Essentially, Rivest went home that night and solved the whole problem of asymmetric key encryption, and he then presented his paper to Alderman for mathematical review, and he could not find any flaws. The solution came out of a year-long collaboration with Shamir and Alderman, so the system was named RSA encryption. So what exactly is RSA encryption? Well, as you know, we have covered this in class. So briefly, RSA encryption is based on modular functions, and everyone has a personal number n. This is a public key. N is made from two prime numbers, P and Q. Now, if Bob wants to send Alice a private message, he uses Alice's n value and inserts it into the general one-way function, which is also public knowledge. He then sends this to Alice. So how does Alice decrypt this message? Alice must reverse the one-way function, so Rivest designed a function that is reversible only if someone knows the value of P and Q, and since P and Q are Alice's private key, she's the only one that knows it. So is it possible for someone to find N by factor out P and Q? Technically yes, but the bigger the P and Q value is, the harder it gets to factor out N, and to reverse the process would take a massive amount of time. N tends to be at least 10 to the 308th power, and the National Institute of Technology recommends a 2048-bit key for the RSA. However, the bigger issue is still at present. As computers and technology becomes more powerful, someone may figure out a way to factor out the N value quicker and get the P and Q. Over the past 20 years, Hellman, Diffie, and Merkle have been known as the cryptographers who invented the concept of public key cryptography. However, according to the British government, public key cryptography, what they termed non-secret encryption, was actually created by 3 employees at the government communications headquarters nearly 10 years before the famous trio. So who exactly were the original creators? On April 1st, 1965, James Ellis joined the newly formed Communications Electronic Security Group. The CESG was a special selection to ensure the security of British communications. But who exactly was James Ellis? James Ellis was born in 1924, and he was a British engineer and cryptographer. He conceived the idea of non-secret encryption, better known as public key cryptography. One of his greatest qualities was a vast breadth of knowledge. He read any scientific journal that he could get his hands on and never threw anything away. Due to his reputation, he was asked to examine the key distribution problem. Ellis began his attack on the problem by searching through his treasure trove of scientific papers. He discovered years later that the key distribution was not a necessary part of cryptography. The event which changed this view was the discovery of a wartime Bell telephone report. The idea was that the receiver, Alice, deliberately created noise which she could measure before adding it to the communication channel that connects her with Bob. Bob could then send a message to Alice, and even if Eve tapped the communication, she would not be able to read the message. Ellis then came up with an idea from the wartime Bell telephone. Can this be done with ordinary encipherment? Can we produce a secure encrypted message readable by the authorized recipient without any prior secret exchange of the key? This idea was very similar to Diffie, Hellman, and Merkel's, but he was years ahead of them. In September of 1973, Clifford Cox joined the team of GCHQ. So Clifford Cox was born in December of 1950. He's a British mathematician and cryptographer. He was assigned a mentor and was taught by Nick Patterson, who guided him in the world of cryptography. Nick Patterson then told Cox about the theory that Ellis had made. The theory led to Clifford formulating the first RSA asymmetric cipher. But even though Clifford and Ellis created the first public key theory and what we now know as the RSA asymmetric cipher, they could not release the information or publish it since it was done secretly for the British government. By 1975, James Ellis, Clifford Cox, and Malcolm Williamson had discovered all the fundamental aspects of public key cryptography, but Clifford and Ellis had to remain silent due to working for the GCHQ. Everything had to remain a secret. 28 years later, the GCHQ went public, and in 1997, Clifford Cox completed some important work on the RSA that was an interest to the wider community and would not be a security risk if it was published. So the GCHQ decided that it was time to change its policy. Cox, on December 18th of 1997, delivered his talk to about the GCHQ contribution to public key cryptography, finally giving the credit to the people who created and discovered the public key first. In summary, World War II revolutionized the encryption and decryption process with the invention of electronic computers. Still, a prevailing issue was key distribution, made even more prevalent and difficult with the popularization of computers. Two American cryptographers discovered the solution to key distribution, creating the general concept of asymmetric ciphers and the use of one-way functions. Three MIT scientists, Ravesh, Shimon, and Alderman, created the first working asymmetric cipher penned RSA. GCHQ workers developed the idea of non-secret encryption, or public key cryptography as we know it now, and the workable one-way function that fulfilled the mathematical and logical requirements nearly 10 years before their American counterparts. And lastly, the references. Thank you for listening.